didn't know how to read or write until I was 10 years old. Education wasn't a priority for girls in Bangladesh. It was thought the more education a woman had, the less desirable she would be to a man. My parents' marriage was arranged, and my mother assumed the same fate for me and my sisters. My mother, a traditional Bengali Muslim woman, felt that school was a waste of time for her daughters. My father, on the other hand, a well-traveled man who received his education in the States, insisted that his 3 daughters have equal access to education as any boy. Growing up, I recall listening to my father tell stories about America, and in his words, you could be anything. I believed him. During Bangladesh's war with Pakistan, my father, Pakistani, was forced to flee to America. He had to leave my 2 sisters and me behind with our mother. In my father's absence, my mother kept us home. I so desperately wanted to go to school. Every morning, I would watch boys and girls in uniform walk to school in front of our home. I would play dress-up, and my dress-up was always a schoolgirl's uniform. My father's books filled our home, and though I could not read a word, I would pick up the book and stare at a page and say some gibberish words as if I was reading English. I still have journals filled with wavy lines where I pretended to write but didn't know how. In the early 70s, after Bangladesh gained its independence from Pakistan, the political climate became even more unstable. The constant curfews and uprising to overtake the government made it impossible for anyone to attend school. In the midst of the confusion, and my father being overseas, my mother decided to abandon our home in the city, leaving my 2 sisters behind with my aunt. Since I was the youngest, she took me to live with her in a village called Dinajpur. I lived in Dinajpur for 2 years. There were no schools there. Children worked alongside adults. Daily survival and the ability to find food was far more important than any textbook. Every so often, my grandmother, Nani, would come to Dinajpur and plead with my mother to return to Dhaka, but my mother refused. My aunt was able to enroll my 2 sisters in a Canadian school in Dhaka. I would receive letters from them, but I could not read them or reply. I spent my days working in the field, cooking, cleaning, and if I was really lucky, I got to climb coconut trees with the other kids in the village. Against my mother's wishes, I got down on my hands and knees and pleaded with my Nani to take me back to Dhaka. She did. I spent the next 2 years living separated from my mother, my father, and my 2 sisters. My Nani tried to enroll me in school, but I was denied admission since I could not pass the appropriate entrance exam. I remember sitting in the headmistress's office and watching my Nani beg. She opened her purse and took out a big stack of cash, but the headmistress told her, "Your granddaughter is not smart. You should look for a husband for her and save that money for her dowry." I came back home shamed and embarrassed. My uncle decided that he would homeschool me. According to him, what I was lacking was a good beating and discipline. For the next several months, I was at his mercy. Unfortunately, my uncle beat me more than he taught me. I received occasional letters and cards from my father, which I could not read. Nearly 5 years had passed since he left for America. Then one day we received word that he was granted a green card and purchased plane tickets for all of us to move to America. The excitement was unbearable. My sisters began to prep for our move. They practiced both English and French that they learned at their school. Within weeks, my mother returned from Dinajpur and suitcases were bought. My older cousins who have traveled to the States started giving us a fast course in life in America. First, we needed to learn how to eat with forks and knives. We would sit at table with empty plates and practice. I so desperately wanted to come to America and be with my father, but I was terrified at the same time. I wondered if my father would still want me, this uneducated, stupid girl, for his daughter. At the airport, he gave me a journal and said, "One day you'll be able to fill these pages. I found a school for you. It is 2 minutes from our home in Memphis." "But I don't know how to read or write. They won't accept me," I told him. He said, "It is different in America." The Memphis school district worker told my father that I should be in the 5th grade. Being in school, especially a school in America, was such an honor and a privilege. I knew that I owed it to every single child I left behind in Bangladesh to learn everything I could possibly learn. As I walked into the classroom for the very first time and saw both boys and girls sitting together and studying, I knew my father was right. I can be anything in America. My father helped me with my homework late into the nights. I worked on memorizing words and phrases. Little by little, I learned to speak English. 4 years after arrival in Memphis, my father died of a sudden heart attack, leaving me and my sisters behind with our mother once again. My mother, now a widow, was even more determined to get us married as quickly as possible. At the age of 15, I was receiving marriage proposals from men twice my age from Bangladesh, all wanting to come to America. I knew that my mother had to marry off my 2 older sisters before she could get to me. That gave me some time. College was my ticket away from my mother, and I was determined to do whatever it took to get away. With no financial or any form of support from my mother, I applied to colleges. I received an acceptance letter from Harvard, but my mother refused to let me go. She didn't want me around American Christian boys, so I applied to women's colleges and received an acceptance letter and scholarship from Agnes Scott College in Atlanta. In late August of 1986, I loaded my brother-in-law's car with my suitcase and said my goodbyes. My mother stood outside the car as it pulled away, screaming, "You are making a mistake. You are nobody. You will be back." To this day, I hear those words in my mind, and I fight to prove her wrong, and I fight to remind myself that I am not stupid. Now I'm a mother of 2 very intelligent girls. I read to them before they were born. I wrote to them before I ever laid my eyes on them. I haven't told my daughters about my childhood because I don't want to deprive them of a grandmother. But they do know one thing, that the old school way of thinking that girls are second-class citizens, only capable of bearing children and being an obedient wife, is not their fate. My father used to say, one of my daughters is equal to 3 boys. Actually, Dad, I think we're a lot more than that.